Becky Gannon, and this is the 50th episode of Mad About Miniatures podcast. To celebrate this landmark, I have two very, very special guests today. I'm talking about the famous husband and wife team from England who are known throughout the miniature world for their breathtaking and historically accurate miniature recreations of the most magnificent palaces and historic homes. Yes, we will be talking to renowned miniaturists Kevin Mulvany and Susie Rogers. Let's get started. Hello, Kevin and Susie. It's such an honor to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, Becky.
Hi, Becky. It's
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Good to be here, yeah.
Well, I'm very excited because, of course, you are the OG superstars of the miniature world.
Well, very nice of you.
I was trying to explain it to a few people who just are younger and just recently came into it, and I called you the Beatles of the miniature world. You're both from England. You both did something new and exciting, and set the standard for miniatures in many, many ways.
Well, we've had a very long career. We've done lots of different things. Yeah, it's very nice to hear all of those things from you.
So you started in the 80s, right out of college, right, Kevin?
Yes, that's right. Obviously didn't make palaces back in the day. So I didn't even know about the miniatures world at all. Susie and I we got an old triangle doll's house from a market, and we just did that up for fun. Something kind of clicked immediately for me, really. And I just kind of thought, wow, where could I go with this? And Susie loved doing it just for fun anyway. And we'd always done that kind of thing when we were kids. And then I took it forward from modest beginnings in making very quick sort of dolls' houses in our rented apartment bedroom, and then trying to sell them to shops in London mainly, while Susie went off and sort of earned some real money for a few years.
I love the idea that somewhere in someone's attic is a Kevin Mulvany dollhouse that they might not even know is by you.
Yes. No, that's very true. I mean, in the early days, I was making one a week, so that there'll be a good few out there, a few dozen out there. People may have, they don't know what they've got. And they would have literally just gone into one of the 2 or 3 really great shops in London and bought one. My name would not have been relevant, really.
Wow. One a week. And now it's more like 1 or 2 a year, right?
One every 2 years currently.
1 every 2 years. Okay, I stayed corrected.
Yeah, so that's like 104 of my earliest attempts.
Oh my goodness. So how did you sort of progress? You just kept working on it and got the eye of someone?
Yeah, I just kind of really immediately, I could see what was in the shops, and I wanted to do something more realistic, more architecturally interesting and correct. That wasn't that difficult to achieve because, what was around was quite simple, really. But I did come across architectural moldings, which were made by a particular kind of guy in this country, and I guess in America as well. And when I found the moldings are so important. So, you can make windows and doors and all the sort of architectural elements. And once I found those, the sky was the limit, really. And I wanted to do bigger and better things. And I got noticed for doing that. And then the shops asked me to do more complicated things. And the prices started to go up a bit, and clients would come into shops and ask for extra special things. And then the shops would get on the phone to me and say, we've got somebody who wants something like really interesting. I think you can do it. Will you have a go at that? And I would just say, yeah. I said yes to everything.
Wow. Well, Susie, was there like a certain point where you got a certain commission and you were like, I can quit and do this full time? Or did it just sort of happen gradually?
I was pregnant, so I thought, well, rather than trying to go back to work after this, maybe I'll give miniatures a go. And I had always helped Kevin in the evenings and at weekends doing bits of painting and whatever. So it was fun. I never really took it very seriously. And then all of a sudden, I had a baby on the Sunday and joined Mulvany and Rogers on the Monday. We started work on Versailles. So I started on the first palace with Kevin.
I think that was Malmaison, actually.
Oh no, that was before we had children, wasn't it?
No.
I don't know. Do you know what? We have made so many things and we're so very old that we can't remember one project to the next. So I'll be guided by you. It was a Malmaison, which was a beautiful mini chateau that Napoleon had built for Josephine. Yeah, we did that for a client in Bermuda, I think. So I was working on that when we just had our first child, and I decided to stay with Mulvany and Rogers because they seem to be quite nice.
That is incredible. And somehow you were painting decorative moldings and running around to feed the baby at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. At the same time, yes, the baby was with me, and I was painting with one hand and dealing with the baby with the other. But it was fine. It was great. Yeah, we had more children after that, so it couldn't have been that bad. And yeah, it's been great from that point of view, because obviously we could tailor our hours to our children's needs. So yeah, we've been very lucky.
Well, one thing I love about your story is that you're both art history majors. And you know how everyone always says, what can you do with an art history major?
It's true.
You've done a lot with an art history major.
It's absolutely true. We use art history every single day, and neither of us is particularly good at maths. And we also use maths every single day. So yeah, nothing goes to waste when you're making miniatures.
Although it's very true, I think we both immediately after university wondered what the hell we were going to do with art history degrees. I think Susie thought about teaching. She did qualify as a teacher. And I went into the film business for 6 months or so and sort of learned a bit there. But I think the main thing that struck me immediately, that going to work for somebody else, was I didn't want to work for somebody else. I just wanted to do my thing. I know poor Susie had to struggle in the real world, for a few years, but I think, she's fundamentally somebody who likes to do her own thing as well. And the fact that we could do it together and that we have very complementary skills, quite different skills, but, very complementary, is just kind of a stroke of luck, really. But it stood us in very good stead for what we do.
I understand what you're saying. I worked as a lawyer for many years, but then I took off to have kids, and then I kind of created my own media business. And once you work for yourself, you cannot go back.
No. That's very true.
I just could not stand going in I had to be at my desk at 9 o'clock and then being given work to do. And it was interesting work, and I learned a lot, but it's like it was somebody else's work. Somebody else got that job and gave it to me to do. And I wanted to be the one that got the job and did it myself.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned that you have a pretty good way of dividing things up.
Yes.
How do you divide them up between you?
So I suppose I am more the cabinet maker and architect. I'm incredibly kind of neat and a bit of a perfectionist in terms of accuracy.
No.
Yeah. I think I got that from my granddad. His motto was perfection in every direction, which is a silly motto to have, really. I don't know. It's not possible, is it? But I suppose it's something to aim for. And Susie is very much the naturally flowing artist who doesn't like to work from plans. It all comes tumbling out of her head through her hands. So she will do decorative work, finishes. She's also a fantastic, researcher. She is a great administrator, although that's something she doesn't particularly enjoy. But yeah, I'm definitely a cabinet maker and architect. That's my main interests.
So I'm guessing you're the one who does all what must be incredibly precise measurements.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that is at the root, the heart of what makes our work maybe stand out. I do obsess about detail and measurements. So I guess a symptom of that is that the drawings that I do will be an exact blueprint of how it will be in 3 dimensions. To achieve that, I work with my pencils are very hard, so I use like a 4H pencil to do my drawings, which Susie says she can't even see my drawings because they're so faint, because the pencil is very, very a faint pencil, but it's a very accurate, makes a very thin line, and that translates into the real thing. So like a fraction of a millimeter on my drawings, I can read that, and I know that will translate into the real thing. Whereas if you use a thick pencil that might have a millimeter or more of a thick line, well, there's a lot of play in that line that you could get things a little bit wrong. Wow. So I do obsess over accuracy to begin with the drawing.
I think some of our biggest arguments, certainly in the early days, were about the use of a 4H and an HB pencil, because I would draw something, sketched out what it was going to look like, and Kevin would freak and say, I can't cut this. It's just, huge, big fat pencil lines. And I'd be saying, well, you know what I mean. And he was going, no, you've got to be accurate. And we still do have little discussions about those two aspects of our ways of working. But I think because we've been working together for so long, Kevin is very accurate. I mean, I'm not inaccurate.
No.
We learn to dance around each other and accommodate each other's ways of working.
Well, the reason I asked about measurement is I've read your book, and in it, there's sort of a scene where someone else does a staircase and there's no fitting. They just send the finished staircase and it just slides perfectly into this space. As someone who sort of struggles to fit things together, my mouth kind of went open. Like, how did that happen? So that makes sense that you measured down to the smallest fraction and that you even watch your pencil lines, because how else would that happen?
Yeah, that's right. But obviously, there are a lot of problems that could occur from drawing to 3 dimensions.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a case of working slowly from good drawings. The rooms that we do are all loose fit on boards. And so when they go into a carcass, I mean, before they get fully fixed into a carcass, they'll be in and out, I don't know, hundreds of times to have little adjustments made. And it's really, you cannot fix something with glue until you're entirely finished with the tricky work, because bitter experience tells you once you commit to glue and something goes in, you can't get it out, and then you want to change something. That's really difficult. So yeah, it's just in and out a million times. Make sure everything comes together. If you're talking about mitered joints in the back corners of rooms, you need to just check that so many times before you commit to the finishing.
You were right. You are so lucky that you have complementary skills, because to me, I do think it takes both to make something really great. You have to have the measurements, the commitment, but especially for the art and everything, I think a little creativity, a little free flowing probably spices things up a little.
Yeah, I think they work, as you say, I think they work very well together, because it would just to be my work, it would look absolutely terrible. But because it's on this base of supreme accuracy, it looks great. It works. Kevin provides the bones and I add the wobbly flesh, as it were. But it is a good way to work. We have developed this over time. We've always been like that, but it's taken a long time to actually work together in harmony and get those two things to work the best way they possibly can.
Yeah, I think if you look at my early work, which was mainly me, without Susie's input, if you see one of my early houses where I would be doing most of the painting really and finishes, there's a definite kind of slightly different look, and you could read that as my early work. And it is still nice work, but I think it kind of lacks something.
It's just different. It doesn't lack something. It's just different.
It lacks the Susie sparkle.
Well,
I couldn't do what Susie does, and although she thinks she could do what I do, actually she couldn't do what I do.
I think I could do what you do.
Yeah, you do. Susie has told me in the past, I'm fed up doing all this decorative painting. I want to do what you do. So just show me how to do what you do and I'll do it. And I say, no, I'm not even going to show you, because I know you're not built like I am, and you would get fed up keeping everything so tight and obsessing about that kind of thing. You wouldn't enjoy that. So we have had a few kind of moments arguing about that kind of thing. I think we know what our roles are, really, and we stick to it.
So the first time I saw your work in person was during COVID, actually. We took a road trip, and one of the things that was kind of open during COVID was KSB Miniatures, which you know very well.
Yes.
A beautiful museum in Maysville, Kentucky.
Fabulous museum.
Just an incredible museum. And I walked in, and your Spencer house is in a room which I can only assume is built for it.
Yes.
Yeah, specially built.
What an honor.
Yes.
Yeah, we were so honored when they did that.
Clearly specially built, and you walk in, and my jaw just dropped. It was the biggest, most beautiful, most accurate, Even now, I have no words for how I felt the first time I saw it.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I mean, had seen the throne rooms at that point, but I had seen like the Collymore fairy castle. I'd seen some lovely miniatures, but nothing like that both was historically accurate, but also had so much atmosphere and artistry.
we were very lucky because, of course, we talk about our skills, but we also have to pay tribute to the third aspect of what we do. And that's the other people who contribute furniture and paintings. The work that they do just brings our work alive. So part of the success of any of our pieces, and obviously Spencer House is one of those, is the fact that it's got such beautiful furnishings and paintings and lighting, the whole thing. So we always like to think of our houses, or especially our bigger houses, our palaces and things. We always like to think of them as treasure houses. So they contain the best work of so many different people. We can have up to, 30 people contributing to one of our palaces. I mean, it looks great because everyone does their best work.
And also, I think you mentioned the Thorn Rooms, which is very important. We were really inspired by the Thorn Rooms when we started out, that book that everybody knows. And, they are terrific rooms, and they each one of those rooms has atmosphere. I think when you look at what Mulvany and Rogers are kind of well known for, they are these great big miniatures, big buildings where it's not just one box room after another individual box room. These are whole buildings. And so there's a realism there that you feel sucked in, and you can, through the rooms, that you could feel yourself moving through, looking at this fabulous collection of all kinds of things in different rooms, dining rooms and drawing rooms and bedrooms. And I think there's an atmosphere of a real house that we enjoyed creating, that, the Thorn Rooms, for all their brilliance, they were just box rooms, and they didn't really do whole houses. And obviously, because we love architecture, doing the exteriors is very important to us. So the exterior then linking to the interior is what maybe gives, our work this extra big real dimension.
I totally agree. There's nothing like seeing the whole thing. Do you have a room that is your favorite, or that was especially fun or especially hard to complete?
I think probably the most challenging room was the painted room.
Yes.
So on the top floor, you have the huge red silk drawing room with the amazing huge ceiling, which was, very challenging and is a lovely thing. And the painted room is linked through to that. And it was very famous in real life in its day for being a new kind of decorated scheme that had never been done before. There was a lot of visits to Italy and Greece and so on by the architect in the 18th century who put that together. And the moldings are so fine, the little low relief sculptures that Susie did over the fireplace. So we'd never really had to work that fine before. And lots of people say that it's their favorite room. Well, a lot of people say that Spencer House really kind of, knocks them over.
Yeah.
We don't often get to see our work when it goes abroad. We don't often get to see it again. But obviously, we have been back to Case Museum a couple of times. And when we did go back after maybe 10 years of doing Spencer House, maybe 15 years, I can't remember. But I do remember standing in front of it and thinking, oh, wow, did we make that?
That's funny, because I was going to ask, do you ever see your work and your eye goes to the one thing you weren't sure about? Are you able to appreciate it?
There's always stuff that you pick up and you think, oh dear, that's not very good. But we hate to be picked up over inaccuracy or sloppy work, gaps and things like that. We absolutely hate it. Historians might look at our work, architects might look at our work, and obviously very, very, knowledgeable people. And so we don't like to be caught out on any front. If you're doing Spencer House, very famous, beautiful building in London, you really have to do it well and focus down, as I say, particularly on the moldings, which in Spencer House, every molding in every room is different and decorated in with different carving and so on. And so very, very challenging to get that right. And the painted room is full of extremely fine and beautiful painted work, gilded work, sculpture work. Yeah, it all came together in the painted room, I think, for me.
Did you do all the gilding, Susie?
I did, yes. It was incredibly fine because they've got tiny little fillets, less than 1 millimeter wide, when you build up all the cornices and the entablatures. And I mean, it was just a real challenge to, manage that and to keep it consistent and to keep it neat. But there's nothing like working with gold leaf. It's got a life of its own. It's much more forgiving than paint, actually, because paint only catches the light in one direction, whereas gilding's just got this lovely glow. But it was hard. It was really tough on the eyes. I had lots of coffering to do the little bits of gilding in, but it's very rewarding. I love gilding.
I've heard you have a special vacuum cleaner that you just use to vacuum up the gold dust.
Yeah, well, I used to have until it broke down. And then I had the bag, which was full of gold leaf. And I thought, what do I do with this? Do I hang on to it or do I chuck it? So I threw it in the bin. I'm sure there wasn't pure gold in there by that stage. It was probably full of hair and bits of plaster from the studio. So I think I was fooling myself thinking that was going to be my retirement pot.
I think any retirement plan that banks on a vacuum cleaner bag is probably flawed.
I think you're probably right.
Regardless of the contents. That's my financial viewpoint there. And did you do all the plaster molding, Susie?
Well, it's a mixture. So Kevin and I have our separate parts to play in this. So Kevin will make more of the sort of structural framework aspects of the plaster moldings, and then any sort of freehand carved or model detail I will do, and we'll put the two together. So yeah, again, it's another shared enterprise. But generally, if anything is freehanded, it's me.
But again, it's a good combination of our skills. So I don't mind. I'm quite happy and quite enjoy cutting the finest filigree shapes out of, say, card or very thin card or something like that. Foliate scrolls and flower anything that's incredibly detailed, I will cut that with a knife, and then I will mount that onto some kind of backing, and then I'll pass that to Susie, and then she will model up three-dimensional detail on top of that. So she's working from a very accurate base, and then she puts the kind of the feeling and the realism into that.
How long did it take you to complete the Spencer house, which I'll just note now is the ancestral home of Diana Spencer, Princess Di?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it was probably just over a year, was it? Or 18 months?
No, more like 18 months,
was
I
it?
think.
Yeah, about 18 months.
Because not only is it an imposing building, but every inch of it is gilded, and the amount of flourishes and details is truly astonishing. So you must go and see these houses before you do them.
Yeah, it's very important for us to go and do a site visit because you can look at photographs, you can have floor plans, you can have measurements, archival documents, but unless you actually go and experience the feel of the place, it sounds very fanciful, but you have to kind of not just know it in your head, but you have to feel it in your heart and just get a real sense of what the atmosphere is like. We had a good couple of visits there, sort of being allowed to measure and just go around and get a sense of the scale of the place.
This might be a controversial opinion, but while I love the Thorn Rooms, I find them a little cold, and I do not find your work that way. And there's just something about it that invokes the history. It doesn't look like a model home to me. It looks like a real home, and I start thinking about the history and what happened there. And somehow you do really capture that.
Yeah, I think we're lucky to be given these commissions of these beautiful houses that, nowadays are a little bit cold in themselves because they're museums and they're not, or generally not lived in. And a lot of their furnishings and so on have disappeared. So, for example, when we did Ham House, which was a very great favorite of ours, and we were given the choice of what to make, and we jumped at Ham House, we put our heart and soul into it and were given the budget by the client to commission everything that would have been originally in that house in the 17th century. So all the paintings, all the marquetry cabinets and so on, silverware, everything down in the kitchens.
Yeah, so not just the big ticket items like the paintings and the fancy cabinets, but things like little tiny foot warmers that ladies would put their feet on with coals in to keep their feet warm under their dresses and things. Just little tiny things that kind of give a scale and like you said, a sense of life to the overall scene. Because that's really important.
Also, miniature lighting, I think, is really important to our projects to get the feel through lighting of realism. just for example, most miniature lighting runs on 12 volts, but if you knock that back to 10 volts and just dim it down slightly, it just brings in more atmosphere. Okay, things get a little more gloomy, but that increases the atmosphere. And then so we could put in all the candles, all the chandeliers into that, say, that project. And when we were lucky enough to be able to exhibit our Ham House in the real Ham House, which is a National Trust house in London, all the staff and curators there, they said they were so knocked out by it because they work in basically a museum, and they said having our miniature house in there with all the lighting, and it was almost as if the real Ham House from the 17th century was back in the house, but everyone had just left. So because we don't have dolls in our miniature houses, we kind of feel that they destroy the feeling of life and realism because they don't move. But everything else, so that our fires are glowing and our candles are lit and the food is ready, and it's almost like everybody's rushed outside to see a comet or something, and they're going to come back in a minute. And so we want that. That's why maybe they feel real. I don't know. Every detail that we can put in to do with real life will be there.
Wow, that must have been a real tribute to hear them say that.
It was lovely. In fact, it made a bit of a stir when the National Trust people got to hear about it nationally. So the director of the National Trust rushed down from London to see it, and curators from the Victoria and Albert Museum heard about it, and they all came down to see it. It was lovely and very special for us because it's like one of our favorite ever historic houses. It wasn't quite finished when the deadline came and it had to go on show there. So we still had, a lot of doors to fit and details to finish. We spent a month coming home every night and then getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, going up the motorway to Ham House and trying to do a couple of hours work before they opened to the public. And then we had to wait around all day until we got a chance to work a bit in the evening.
Wow.
Working in the evening was quite an experience.
Oh, it was terrifying.
It was a little bit spooky, old houses like that, when there's nobody around. We were working till 11 midnight sometimes, and it was literally just us in the house. Got a bit spooked sometimes, I think, but it was special, I tell you that.
What made you pick that? Because you said you were given the choice by the client to pick any house. Why was it your favorite?
It's just one of our favourite periods, 17th century. It's a lovely time in architectural design. A lot of geographic influences in Europe, like Dutch, French, English, kind of had a synergy. So you get to create a little bit of everything. It was also, it's just a very beautiful house. And it's an old survivor because, obviously it's a long time ago and it wasn't very well looked after for a few hundred years. And so we felt that the house wasn't doing justice to itself. And so we took Ham House that exists now, which is all shabby and faded and rather dusty and kept in the dark because everything is so precious and falling to pieces. And we took it and we returned it down a time tunnel to its 17th century self. And it was a party house for very rich courtiers back in the day. And so we just turned it back into that with glowing silks and shining silver and gleaming this. And it was a lovely opportunity. And I think that's what the staff at the house actually really fell upon. They thought, oh my goodness, yeah, you brought the house alive. This is just how it should be. That's one of the great things that I think anyone working in miniature can do. You can make a fantasy house. You can take a house back to how it once was, or that you'd always want to live in, or you can do anything you like with miniature, and you can do it and finish it because, of course, it's small. It's not like your own renovation or anything. So that's one of the lovely aspects of making miniatures.
Have you ever been asked to do a house where you weren't crazy about the architecture or had a little doubt, or do you just turn those down? Like, what happens in that case?
Well, it's funny you should say that.
We just rejected a good project, but we rejected it because we didn't really like what they wanted us to do. So I think we've been lucky.
Actually, I think the Albert Hall was something.
Yeah, actually.
We got asked to make the Albert Hall, and it's so big.
It is.
And, we had to scale it down a lot. And there's nothing
not very attractive either.
No, it's kind of very heavy Victorian building, which is not our favourite period. So we had to scale it down too much. Yeah, the client loved it, but it didn't really work for us.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's the dome and the largeness of it that is its most striking feature.
You're absolutely right. And by wanting us to sort of reduce everything down, it didn't work. And you're right. It is its own scale, isn't it? Its massiveness.
I mean, we have to scale down every building we do generally, unless we're doing an exact copy of somebody's house. But if we're doing a palace or a country house, then obviously you have to scale those down because they're so vast. If you were to do the whole of Versailles, it probably would cover a real tennis court. It would just be crazily big. So we have to leave out so many rooms and so many wings, whole parts of buildings. So we sort of work with the client and agree the bit that we're going to do and what we're going to leave out and whether it works. We make very small models called maquettes, which are little cardboard models you could hold in the palm of your hand. But they're three-dimensional and you can look through little openings and you can get a feel of it. So you talk with the client using the maquette about making changes, about whether it's going to work, how it will flow. That's very important. So, you're losing, in a palace, you're probably losing 100 rooms that are there, but you don't need to do all those attics and you don't need 20 bedrooms. You only need the most important ones.
Yeah, and I think if you choose well and you're absolutely faithful to not just the physical accuracy of the place, but if you're faithful to the sense of atmosphere, I think people look at it and they don't think, well, where's the rest? They just think, that's such and such a place.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at your houses, I don't think what's missing. I think this is how it should be.
That's good. No, thank you. That's good.
So what's interesting to me about KSB Miniatures is they also have another house that you did, Savage Manor, that is quite different in that it's not the recreation of the actual house.
Yeah, I absolutely loved that project. It was almost one of my favorites because it was building a story from scratch. So Kay had her ancestors were the Savages, obviously, and she has English roots, and she wanted to put together this idea of what the ancestral home would have looked like. And so we built it from scratch and we invented on the bones that she gave us of historic facts about her family, about her, great grandfather being the Archbishop of York back in the early 17th century. Late 16th century. We built a family house and we had stories that we wove around these characters. It was such a lovely way to start. So instead of just starting with an actual building, we built the building around the story that we wove. I just loved every single second of that project.
And also because it is one of our favorite periods. So we were just choosing, like kids in a candy shop, we were just choosing rooms from all our favorite Jacobean late Tudor houses and just, trying to weave them together into Savage Manor.
Oh, I bet that was fun because in any house, there's probably a room where you're like, that's not quite up to snuff of the rest of the house. But instead, you're like, you can just pick all our favorite bits and put them together.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was, and of course, it's always lovely working with Kay because she's so involved, but she's not involved in as much as, she lets you do your thing. But we have good discussions about what's needed, and then off we go and do it. And then, of course, we go and see it set up in the museum, and it's just such fun. I mean, setting it all up. We were there setting up the Perfection in Miniature exhibition, which it's part of. Bill Robertson was there, and we were just having a great time. It was a really lovely project to do.
So had the ancestral home been destroyed?
Well, there was an ancestral home and it no longer exists. There weren't really very many, if any, proper historical documents that showed us what it looked like. But obviously we know enough about architecture. We knew the basic dates. So we had free reign to invent it. And of course, everyone's dead, so they're not going to tell us that it's wrong.
Right.
It's kind of like our favorite country house hotels in this country that we love to go for a weekend. We just almost wanted to make it like that, pull the best of all the English beautiful country houses together. You would walk through that front door and just have the most beautiful weekend there.
Right. Or it is. It is. It is not a palace. It really feels like a beautiful home.
Yeah, that was exactly what we wanted to achieve. So thank you.
So, in looking at your interviews and reading your books, there's always like little bits where you say, in the early days, we were self-taught and we had some crazy techniques that maybe we don't use anymore.
Well, we we once used sugar for asphalt roof felting, so that was a no-no. I think we've also used rolled oats for a long time ago for flint, knapped flint.
Yeah, I think one of the things that other professionals see me using, which they kind of like, they raise an eyebrow, they can't really get their head around it. So I do everything with what we call over here, we call a Stanley knife, which is like quite a heavy duty craft knife. And they all assume that everything must be done with a scalpel. And most model makers work with scalpels. And I never really got on with a scalpel. I don't know why, but I just kind of, I like the solidity of a more solid craft knife, and I can cut more. I feel I can cut more accurately and steadily with a more solid knife.
Do you think a scalpel is an X-Acto knife in the US?
Yeah, it's similar to it. Yeah.
Okay.
The scalpel's a bit pointier, I think. But yes,
a scalpel is literally what a surgeon would use.
Okay. Okay.
So they have really extremely sharp, but really quite almost a kind of slightly flexible blade.
I love the idea of you not hacking away. I love the idea of you standing in front of this beautiful, delicate palace with a big old craft knife.
Yeah. Again, if other craftsmen come into my studio, they kind of scratch their heads and they're looking for tons of equipment, special equipment, which I just don't have. I think that's probably come from being self-taught and just finding that ways around problems in efficient, non-expensive ways that doesn't require expensive machinery. Plus, I also have an extremely talented assistant who is highly skilled with lots of machinery. So if I need something done that I scratch my head too much, I pass it on to Stephen, who is our full-time assistant, who is properly trained as a model maker and is very technical in the ways that I'm not.
I read something about counting mustard seeds. Is that a true story?
Yeah. It is. We used mustard seeds for some little balls on a cornice in Brighton Pavilion. Yeah, I had to grade them all out of a jar to get them all the right size. And then I realized you could just buy them, buy plastic ones. But yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that, isn't it? Necessity is the mother of invention. You use what you have. You make stuff to suit. It's only latterly that the internet's been around, and you realize you can go shopping for all sorts of amazing things. But eventually, over time, you stick to what you know, don't you? And occasionally, people say to us, "Oh, well, why don't you use 3D printing?" And I see the things that are printed, and they're amazing. And I see the work that people do with them, little shopping carts and this and that. But I suppose we've just got to the stage now where we think, well, we've managed this far. We're not particularly technically computer savvy, as as you've witnessed with our trying to sign up for Skype. So yeah, I think we do what works best for us.
But also, don't you think it's getting too technical is kind of, whether it's 3D printing or too much work on the computer, is kind of not what our clients want. It's almost the antithesis of what our clients want.
That's true.
They want their palace or house to be filled with the work of artists.
Well, the human hand.
The human hand.
Because that's who built the original palace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But just looking to posterity, I think people who have a lot of wealth, let's say, and want to commission something beautiful, it's got to be unique, hasn't it? What's the point in getting a machine to make it? They really need to know that what they're having, nobody else has that. It can only be done by creative people.
Thank you for providing me with such a great segue, Kevin, into my next question, which is I've read that you never do the same project twice or the same palace twice.
No, we would definitely not do our big projects twice, for anybody else. There's too much invested by us 2 years is a long time out of a life. And to think of going back and starting again is just too much.
And also the client, they want something that's unique. I mean, having said that, we have done a few iterations of Versailles, but we haven't done the same part twice. So, because Versailles is vast, isn't it? So there's lots of things you can do. Even if we were to do the Hall of Mirrors again, we do it from a different angle or whatever. Yeah, I mean, also, when you're working on a project for a very long time, it's in your head. You live it, you breathe it, you sleep, eat, drink it. To go through all of that again is rather stale. I think it's nice to move on to something new and fresh.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been an issue as regards every time we send a project away with shippers, and we have to insure it. It's just that thought, oh my goodness me, what if there was some terrible accident and it got destroyed? The client would kind of want it again, but would we actually do it again? I don't know. Well, luckily, we've never had to face that.
Oh, I feel like we should knock on wood or
yeah, that's good.
Yes.
If you're listening at home, please knock on wood.
Yeah, we have a project that is in transit right now, actually, to the States. So fingers crossed.
Always. Now, I read that, let's see, I think it was The Artist House by Charles Rennie Mackintosh. That he said that in some ways, the simplicity of that house was in some ways more difficult than some place like Versailles, where you can maybe stick a little extra floors on something to cover it up.
Yes.
Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, no, it's a fair comment on difficulty, levels of difficulty, because if you look at a highly gilded palace with carving everywhere and just too much to digest almost, there's a bit you can get away with because there's so much going on. But if you have a much more pared back building like an early Georgian house, or for example, we did a beautiful American colonial house from New England, which is just beautiful straight moldings, lovely big rooms, but really quite simple. But everything is on show. All the straight lines, obviously, have to flow very accurately. And the human eye will read everything very quickly. You can't get away with anything except possibly, an amazing palace. Anything that is straighter and more visible to the eye will get picked up straight away. So, yeah, you have to keep everything extremely well balanced and accurate. And yeah, that's not easy to do.
So, do you incorporate your clients into your houses? They must sometimes request, like with a monogram or a portrait, or what are some of the things that you've done?
Oh, yeah, there's quite a bit of that. So some of it's kind of slightly secret. Occasionally, we might not even have told a client that we've picked up a bit of actually something that's lying on the ground at a real palace. We've been to visit a bit of Versailles or something that you're probably not, strictly speaking, allowed to really put in your pocket and take home. Well, you're really not allowed to.
Only stones from outside.
Yeah, a bit of gravel, a grit or something from outside. But we might take that and we might embed it in our model. So, Susie will paint portraits of our clients, sometimes as a surprise, other times, agreement.
There's a portrait of Kay and her husband Lou in the Palm Room in Spencer House in 18th century dress, and they look fabulous. We ask clients to send us a photo of themselves without their glasses on and not smiling. We sometimes don't tell them what it's for, and then we'll present them with this portrait of themselves. And it's always really funny to see them because they usually, generally speaking, look really cool in the costumes. Yeah, we've done that quite a few times. We did do it for a client when we did a Palladian room in the Veneto. Portrait that I copied, it was a courtesan, and so she had a very low cut dress, so I had to put a modesty fichu in. But other than that, it's really good fun to do.
It is good fun to do. I remember one where we did a little French chateau and we went to visit it, and I picked up a conker fallen from a tree in the garden, and I sort of took that home and I peeled off the skin and I dried the sort of like wood, and then I inlaid it into a monogram of that client's initials over for a door inside. I mean, it's a silly little thing, but it just kind of feels really nice. It's a nice link to the real thing, and their clients really love it.
Oh, yes, it's the cherry on top. It's what makes it special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. We work for a client in the US. They're in construction. So we did a trophy over the door of the house. And instead of, the usual sort of martial helmets and pikes and all the rest of it, we put hard hats, shovels and a Kanga drill and all that kind of stuff. So we just made a little trophy out of that, which was fun. And I don't even know if they ever saw it or whether they ever noticed it, but it was there and we knew it was there.
Right. It's like the little secret that shows it was made just for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now, many of these grand palaces and even grand houses that you do, they must have secret rooms or secret passages. Do you make those too on occasion, or is that silly?
No, it's not. It's not silly at all. No, we do make the secret passages. We'll either put a mirror in there that reflects some interesting or strange aspect of the house that you can't access from anywhere else. Or another thing that we do is we'll cut a peephole in the side of the actual building, and it'll have a little secret door, and you can open it and have a fantastic view all the way down a big long room. So there's lots of things like that. We made a secret chapel in Ham House, actually, because obviously it was at the time when lots of different religious wars were going on, and some people weren't allowed to celebrate mass or whatever. So we had a secret chapel, which you can't actually see unless you open a particular part of the thing. So that's only the client has ever seen that. So that was quite a fun thing to do.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then I think there's the secret. No, not secret. They're kind of, they're part of the house, but they're the back stairs, the back passages, the servants' passages, and so on. Which, if you've got room to squeeze them in, they're really lovely. Ham House, is just full of most beautiful, grand rooms. But obviously, it was serviced by servants having to creep down back passages, and we did manage to fit a couple of those in. And once you open the obviously very modest little door that would go down to that passage, and you look down the gloomy passage, and we make them extra gloomy. Again, it just adds a little bit of atmosphere.
So we've got servants' passages like that in Savage Manor.
Yes. Becky, in somewhere like Savage Manor, which is a big structure, it's four square and rooms all flowing into each other, there can be, and there would be in the real building, a number of staircases sort of lost within that structure. And we can do that. And it would be a sort of a staircase that you wouldn't really see the whole thing ever, but you might just glimpse it through another room, just entering into that staircase. So if you hide, a light up that staircase, and it can just sort of glow down, and you see the entrance to that in the middle of the house that you can't actually get to. That's really nice. That's kind of a bit magical.
Well, and it really must show a contrast between how the servants lived and how the people who owned and lived in the house lived.
Yeah.
And I like that you make it extra gloomy.
Definitely.
Because that must have been how it felt to work as a servant there.
Oh yeah. Only the minimal light for you.
Right. It's like the Downton Abbey show where they show the upstairs and downstairs.
Yes, absolutely.
So I've read that you've had one or two run-ins with fire.
Yeah, we had a little phase in our work where it seemed as if we were a little bit jinxed with projects that we were making. So we were making Hampton Court, and during the making of our project, the real Hampton Court had a massive fire, and there was huge damage at the real Hampton Court. The same thing happened at another famous English country house called Up Park. At the time we were making a copy of Up Park, it burned down.
Oh, no. The entire thing to the ground?
Very
Yes.
sadly, very sad. It was a beautiful house. It was another time capsule like Ham House was. So it's one of those houses where it had a rich owner who'd built it, and then subsequent generations had fallen on hard times, so they hadn't made any improvements, and so the house had come down to now largely untouched, and of course it all just completely burned to the ground.
And your model also burned down?
But there was a parallel there, because in our Hampton Court, as I said, the real thing burnt down, but we were virtually finished with our Hampton Court. And as you can imagine, there are wires running all over our models to chandeliers and candles and so on. And they're all hidden behind walls and behind tapestries and so on. the lighting sort of comes together at the end of a project, especially kind of tying everything together with fuses and everything. These days, transformers, are short circuit protected. But back in the day, you would just have a direct current transformer and you would have to put your own fuses into the system. But when you're just kind of linking everything up to test everything, I didn't used to bother with fuses. I would just link everything up and have a look and test it and then disconnect. Unfortunately, at one moment, I was distracted and I connected the power and I got distracted, went in the other room, and then I could smell this burning. And when I came back to the miniature, there was literally smoke coming out from behind the tapestries and so on. And I had to disconnect, obviously, very quickly. The power that goes through that system I mean, there are hundreds of bulbs in a miniature palace, and the power is quite high. And so it will literally melt all the wiring.
Was there a lively marital discussion after that?
The air was blue.
No, that's actually not true, because when we do stuff and one thinks the other one's a stupid person for doing whatever, and they wouldn't do that. But something like that is a genuine accident, isn't it? So you have to just think, okay, right, what do we do now? What's the best way of saving this? So yeah, I think we were just rushing around trying to make sure that everything was fine.
And you were able to save it.
We caught it early enough and we saved it. It was okay.
Well, we smelt it early enough, didn't we?
So one miniaturist told me that he had heard that maybe in the early days, you used to burn a cigarette or a piece of sage inside a house to, I don't know, to do what? Maybe give the walls a smoky look, or is that just apocryphal, or did that happen?
I don't know about not cigarette, obviously, but no, we use a special polish, which we put in at the last minute. And if it's a particularly like a sort of basementy room or something, we'll put like a horrible oil in there that's smells a little bit like moss or something. But generally speaking, it's the smell of wax polish that we really want to get to evoke the idea of a beautiful house that's cared for.
Oh, yes, that's very clever, because the equivalent, the 17th or 18th century equivalent of lemon pledge in our house.
Exactly.
We have a client at the moment who we're doing an Arab-influenced set of interiors, and our client wants us to burn some real incense in there to give it that authenticity.
Yes, which we will do.
Watching very, very carefully as you do it.
Yes.
Not running off to have a cup of coffee or anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Just to me, the thought of introducing a flame that wasn't strictly necessary makes me nervous.
Oh, we just get on with it.
Although Susie does do the most effective glowing fires, all electric, obviously, but they look very hot.
They do. They do look hot.
It's slightly worrying because I use real wood ash in the fires at the end, just to, give them the sense that the ash has fallen through the bars. We've just recently sent a house off, and it's got to go through customs. And I always send a little extra packet of this powder for the client to add a little bit extra when it gets there. I was just thinking, I hope that gets through customs. I've labelled it as wood ash. I don't know if it's going to get through customs, but we'll see.
Worried about a little mystery packet that might just not make it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I can see that, but we'll hope the customs inspector is awed by your work and takes some word for it.
Let's hope.
So, is there a house that you haven't done that you really want to do?
Oh, that's a tricky one, because whenever we go and visit a house, we say, this is the one, we love it, we love it. And I think for Kevin, it was Ham House, and for me, it was doing Savage Manor. I don't know, is it still...
Well, I would really love to build Sir John Soane's house.
Oh, yeah.
In London. So he was the architect of the Bank of England and other sort of lots of buildings in London, particularly. But his own house, he built it to house his collections of antiquities and plaster casts and sarcophagi and so on. It's an amazing place in real life. And if you get the chance to go to London, you should go to Sir John Soane's house. Plus, it has an amazing small room with walls that kind of peel back again and again to reveal a collection of Canalettos and Hogarth paintings. And I would just love to make that and have the fantastic artists that we work with do all the paintings that would go in that room.
I have been there. And it is indeed a fantastic house. And one of the things I love about it that I thought was very unique for the period, although you might have a more informed opinion on that, was he brought the skylight through clear to what we would call the basement. Like in different sizes, they would start up high, and in some way they would go all the way down to the servant's kitchen or the main kitchen.
Yeah, he was obsessed with light and, the effects that light could have. And there are skylights everywhere, and there are also mirrors everywhere. And also he was very keen on convex mirrors that would just kind of obviously twist reality a little bit. And he would mount them up into corners of rooms so that every time you turned, you'd get a little silvery, flickering glimpse of where you were, but in a slightly weird kind of way. Again, in miniature, that would just be so terrific to do.
And I think when you said he had a plaster collection, you almost understated it. You walk in and there are full busts everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. I mean, as you say, he cut right down through the house, through 3 or even 4 floors with a skylight at the top. He made an atrium, which is completely lined on every surface with busts and corbels and bits of cornice. Mostly real antiquities from Italy and Greece. Yeah, it's just stuffed with it. And obviously that's kind of what I love. It's architectural fragments and elements. I would love to fill that with miniature ones. It would be terrific.
I read at the house that the ones that are copied, that they're plaster copies, that for some of the pieces, they are the only plaster copies left as a reference.
Yes, that's right. In fact, that's interesting, not none the least, because it just remind you that plaster copies have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it is one of the techniques that I use to achieve lots of detail,
repetitive
detail over long distance. If you added up all the cornices in, say, Spencer House, it would probably be, I don't know, like 100 meters or something of cornice and dado and skirting that you had to do. And you can't carve all that. You have to use molding techniques. So plaster casts and molds have been around for hundreds of years, and they're invaluable.
Susie, for you, if not a whole building that you want to do, is there a particular mural you'd like to recreate or anything like that? Or have you really done everything you want to do?
No, it's not so much a building, a specific building. I'd very much like to do things that are more ruined. So, for instance, we did a piece a number of years ago now, which we kept for ourselves. It's our studio piece, and it goes on exhibition around the world for various events or whatever. And it's called Ghosts of Versailles, and it's a very precise, beautiful French garden pavilion. But it's wrecked inside. So we've got a hole in the roof, we've got water pouring through, bits of the cornice and corbels have fallen off. The floor is cracked, it's full of moss in one corner, and the windows are smashed. And I would love to do something like that, more of that. For me, that's really interesting, to really ramp up the drama in a space, because we've had a lifetime of creating perfection, I suppose, lovely, perfect interiors, very clean, and the height of their being loved by their owners. And I just love this idea of dereliction. So I think maybe Kevin can make John Soane's, and I'll make the basement, the mossy basement down at the bottom.
That would be wonderful. So do you have much in the way of a personal collection?
Not really, for 2 reasons. One is we don't have time. And the other is we don't have much space. So we've got about 3 pieces, I would say. No, probably maybe 3 or 4 pieces, 2 of which we'll never sell. It's difficult when you're surrounded by miniatures all the time. You don't really want to have too many living with you.
Yeah, we would love to commission 2 or 3 more special pieces, and I think we will. For example, a beautiful painting. We don't actually have our own beautiful miniature painting by one of the best artists. So yeah, that'll be exciting to do that one day.
You're probably so immersed in your projects when you have them, both mentally and physically. The project and all its accoutrements probably take up all your space.
Yeah, we're very lucky. I mean, that is a joy of what we do, is that every project is full of commissioned miniatures from all the top people, and they send them all to us so that we can put it all together. And so, some of the projects that we've had dozens of.
Oh, it's been fantastic.
Of the top painters' work all coming to us here. and we take possession of them for, some months while we put the project together. So we get to study them and enjoy them. And I can't tell you how good these people are. The top miniaturists around the world are breathtakingly fantastic craftsmen, not appreciated enough around the world. I think in the US, you appreciate them a lot more than we do maybe over here. Their work is just totally breathtaking, and we're very lucky to have been able to do projects which have perhaps challenged those artists and craftsmen to do, maybe some of their best work.
It must be amazing too to be able to like place the rug and put the chairs and set the little table.
It is. Obviously, clients have these big collections, but as Kevin says, we have them for a period of time and we just play with them. And, there's that fantastic moment when, well, a house is never really finished. We always think we could do more, but when the house is, in theory, finished and we get to dress it with all the furniture and make sure that everything, because houses are quite often designed around a particular piece or the size of a bookcase or some such thing. And so we get to put all these things in and we light the lights and the house is clean and there's no dust. And it's just such a lovely moment. We sit down and just look at it. And I think that's a kind of transitional moment because the house goes from being something that we've made to a thing in its own right. And we're allowed to look at it, but it is itself. It doesn't need us anymore. That's such a great moment.
That's so beautiful. That's such a beautiful way to put it. It's a nice way to let your baby go.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a last bit of the work that always brings that on as well, which is, say, in a 2-year project, the rooms will only get finally fitted within the last 2 or 3 months. And then the final thing that really lifts it away from, something under construction to finished is the edging that goes on the front that separates all the rooms, which we have an argument with Bill Robertson, who's the great kind of American miniaturist.
I know Bill. He's been on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we must have these like opposite wired brains because he thinks that if you edge everything in white, it disappears. And we think if you edge everything in black, it disappears. Anyway, it's kind of personal, isn't it? I guess. But when we get that edging on in dark polished wood, it's like a frame, isn't it? I suppose around a beautiful picture, it just finishes it off and brings it to life.
That's incredible. So would you have any advice for someone just starting out making miniatures?
Okay. Whoa. If I could remember back when I started.
It's probably a hard question because it's been a long time since you've been in those shoes.
Yeah, it has. It has. I got a bit of advice when I started taking dolls' houses to shops in London from a lovely lady who was very instrumental in resurgence of dolls' house miniatures called Kristen Baybar. She looked at what I'd done and she kind of thought I'd got the roof, the chimneys a bit not quite right. And she sort of said, come out with me. We went out the front of the shop and she looked up at some Georgian house and she said, you see what you've done there? And maybe you haven't got it quite right. So she said, look, make what you see, not what you think you see. So I always thought that was really important, actually. And it made me focus down to always try and make what you're seeing in reality.
Don't guess.
Don't guess. You don't guess. Yeah.
I think that's really good advice. My mom was an artist and she always tells this story of when I went to kindergarten and we were asked to draw pictures of each other, different students. And I had this little velvet dress on. It was holiday time. It had just a little bit of trim. But the little boy who drew me had the trim all over everywhere.
He was obviously very impressed by it.
Yes, but it was everywhere. Of course, it was adorable, but it wasn't what he was actually looking at.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly it. You put your finger on it.
Susie, you got some advice?
Oh, have I got some advice? Never work with your husband. No, that's not it. No, my advice is if you do work with your partner, have clear lines of working practice, but also have separate studios because there's nothing like your own space to make your own mistakes, rectify your mistakes. Yeah, I just think it makes for a much better relationship.
So you have separate studios?
We do. Yeah, we have a door. But sometimes the door accidentally on purpose locks. So Kevin's trapped in his studio.
I can see that having your own studio would be very, very Important. I have a little craft room. I'm not going to even call it a studio, but I don't like other people even walking in there, honestly.
No, WC, you're right. I mean, it's that feeling that it is your space. It's where you are vulnerable. It's where you give of yourself. And you just don't want to have other people in there.
And also, I think, especially with miniatures, you have to concentrate very hard. And if there's anything that is distracting, I can't work. So the guy that works for us, Stephen, sometimes he has to come to our studio to finish a project, and we all work together into the night to get it finished. But I don't work well in those instances because you feel a pressure to chat that normally is not there. And so your mind is not totally on the job.
I have a little tip for you, Kevin. Get some AirPods and don't put anything on them. And and whenever someone tries to chat with you, just point, to the AirPods. Like, catch up now.
Great tip.
Okay, I like that.
We'll be ordering some tonight.
I think you're right. I was just thinking I would almost rather have someone come into my bedroom than go into my studio.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
It is personal what we do.
Yeah. And I think you go into yourself when you're working. To have someone physically in your space means you have to come back out of wherever it is you've gone. And it's just distracting. I don't think the studio is a social space. I'm very happy to socialize and have fun and whatever, but not in my studio.
That's your own space.
Yeah.
Thank you again for being on the podcast. I am so excited about this podcast, and it will actually be my 50th episode. So what better way to celebrate than with the two of you?
Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you.
What's not to like about talking about yourself for an hour? But it's been really lovely. And it's just great. We're so honoured and very touched that you're interested. And thank you. Your questions were very interesting and incisive.
They were. And also, I think the more that we talk about our work, it does help Susie to think about our next book.
The first book was written quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2008. The next book is going to be a bit of a whopper.
What do you mean by a bit of a whopper?
Well, it's got so many of our bigger projects in it now. It's going to have obviously Ham House and Spencer House, and although Spencer House was in the other one, but more of a feature on it. Savage Manor. So many of the big projects that we've done since then.
I think Spencer House just made it into the last book, and it was a project that we stepped up into the kind of second half of our career where, our work sort of has reached its kind of pinnacle, really. It's going to be a good book.
Oh, I can't wait. And if you want to come on and talk and plug your book, the invitation is open.
Well, that's super kind. Thank you.
We'll be there.
We'll be there. Might be a while, but we'll definitely take you up on that.
That is wonderful. So thank you so much. And it was just a privilege and a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Becky.
Same here. Bye-bye, Becky. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Ever since I started this podcast, it has been a dream of mine to have Mulvany and Rogers on this podcast. Today, my dream came true, and it was every bit as magical as I hoped it would be. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also want to thank you for your support, without which this podcast would not be possible. So here's the 50 podcasts under my belt, and hopefully many, many more to come. In the podcast today, we talked about Kay Savage Browning, owner of KSB Miniatures Collection, and American miniaturist Bill Robertson. To learn more about Kay and her fantastic museum, check out my podcast, The Magnificent Miniatures of Maysville. And for more info on the talented Bill Robertson, check out my podcast entitled Adventures in Miniature. These are two of my favorite interviews, and I hope you'll enjoy them. And remember, there are no rules in your dollhouse except the ones you create for yourself. Goodbye.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.